Well, here we are today. It's the day after Thanksgiving, and I hope you had as much to be thankful for as the three of us did. We were all spending time with family, and that's always a great thing. Today, Ed's going to take us through what it takes to get a good CFO to make sure that your numbers are accurate, but more importantly, that person really understands your business and not just your financials. So, with that, Ed, would you mind bringing us up to speed on what it takes to get a good CFO?
Okay, well, first of all, I'd like to talk a little bit how valuable a CFO is. And I'm shocked to find out how many companies don't have access to a CFO, or they have elevated their CPA firm or their controller to provide these services. And I think in this whole presentation, you'll see why it's probably in your best interest to go ahead and hire a CFO, because it's really important to the success of your company. This is part of our 8 drivers of business value, and this is part of the leadership section in hiring the right people so that you can drive results. I guess the first question you might ask, well, what is a chief financial officer? And I want to give you some ideas of what type of qualifications and what they can do. They're financial professionals and usually have a CPA certificate and normally have an advanced degree. What distinguishes them from CPA firms is they have significant experience in running a business. And I like to look at someone with 10 years of experience, because as you find out as we drill down into the responsibilities, it takes a lot of years of on-the-job training to become a proficient, I call, 4-star CFO. And it's a position that's advanced to the controller in a company. And a lot of times controllers come on board and they're automatically given the title of CFO, but they're only maybe meeting 10 or 15% of the responsibilities of a CFO. Usually controllers report to a CFO. And CFOs normally hire CPA firms to perform audits of their financial statements and do tax returns on behalf of the company. So usually the CFO is in the leadership position, identifying who's doing what, making sure they get the right qualifications in to take full advantages of the financial aspects of the company. So I'll go on to the next slide here, and I would like to talk a little bit about how a CFO can unlock the true potential of a business. And to me, a 4-star CFO starts with a strategic plan, working with the leadership and ownership of a company and identifying how you're going to increase the value of that company over the next 3 to 5 years. Another thing a good CFO does, he leads performance with his or her sphere of influence. And the point is here, a lot of people think you have to have everybody reporting to you so you have control over what they're doing and their performance level. Well, I have found in my experience that a good CFO has a sphere of influence that he can pretty much manage initiatives throughout the company in all departments, and people take his opinions to matter and do their jobs accordingly. A good CFO grows profitable revenue and increases margins. A lot of times CFOs say, oh, I don't know anything about the revenue side. Well, that's not a CFO that we're interested in. That's more of a controllership position. Obviously, reducing operating risks is a significant responsibility of a good CFO. So when you hire a CFO, they're going to add value to the bottom line, but they're also going to reduce risk. And that's something that's a little bit more difficult to measure, but it's really important as you try to develop a good ROI on your company. They strengthen the balance sheet. Most controllers, most outsiders don't know how to do that. That's the working capital, making sure you're liquid. as we talked about many times before, being not liquid is a real problem in the future success of a company. They identify strategies inside and outside the company. They create a high performing culture. And this is really where the sphere of influence comes into place, because you definitely have to pay people on performance rather than paying people a fixed amount. The company does better, everybody should be making more money. And there should be that type of alignment in the company to make sure that that happens. There has to be looking for opportunities at all time, M&A opportunities, partnership that could add value. That's all part of what the CFO's role is. And I also think this is extremely important. The last one is participates in IT, digital transformation, and marketing strategies. Obviously, the CFO doesn't have the skill set to lead those initiatives, but they can sure have the leadership position to support the key people in those positions so that the company's properly going in the right direction. I have identified in my career, which is 35 years plus of CFO experience, 4 levels of value and how important it is for increasing shareholder value. The first one is the one that most people hire to. They look for, it's called financial management. And if you understand GAAP, because all the financial statements have to be performed in accordance with GAAP, that's the measurement that's accepted in the business community, they need someone who's a CPA, advanced business degree, and understands how to do this. And it's a very technical oriented position and requirement. And you have to have probably 5 years of education behind you to really get enough of a basis to be able to do this part of the job. And in addition to that, you're also responsible for managing the financial people in the company to make sure that you're billing properly, collecting the cash in a timely manner, et cetera. So even though you hire somebody from outside the company, say from a CPA firm, to handle the CFO responsibilities, probably they're probably trained in doing the statements in accordance with GAAP, but the other parts of running a finance department, they probably don't have any experience in doing so. So it is on the job training in that area. The second area of importance is risk management. Risk management is treasury management, dealing with the banks, making sure you have enough working capital, making sure that insurance, employee benefits, and workers' compensation plans are in effect. This is, for most people that are hired right out of a controllership, this is all developmental, but it's really important to the success of the company. And so, for instance, Ray and I have had a lot of experience in workers' comp, and I tell you, it's the area that very few CFOs really understand, and they just don't have a clue what that part of the responsibility is. So if they get a mod rate over 1, they have no clue that they're putting the company at risk and how important it is to manage that number down. So that's just an example. But you're also involved with all the employee benefit plans. You're also involved with how you handle cash throughout the company, and things of that nature. So risk management is extremely important. The third star of a CFO, a good CFO, is performance. And that involves leading profit improvement initiatives, the value drivers of a business through your sphere of influence, holding everybody accountable for results, extremely important, and reporting the financial information in a manner that people can use it as a measurement stick on performance. Again, performing a high performing culture is extremely important, and grow revenue and margins. It's all about revenue and margins for creating value of a company. and supporting digital transformation, as we talked about in several of our issues before. And the fourth responsibility, and once again, mostly this is developmental unless you get somebody with a lot of experience, is strategic. And it starts with a strategic plan, and someone's got to be involved with leading that effort and making sure that it's updated on an annual basis, and that the initiatives for creating value are being performed, and holding others accountable for that is really important. And then making sure all the opportunities on the M&A front are taken into effect, and oversees IT, HR, and tax strategies for adding value to the company. So I think at this point in time, I'd like to open it up to the floor and hear what my partners think of a value of a really good CFO that can demonstrate performance in each one of these areas.
Well, I'd like to say, Ed, that I haven't really seen this 4 levels of value kind of graphic or the levels put together in this particular way. I really like it a lot, and it really delineates these 4 different areas and the kinds of expectations that you might have for a CFO. I would just have a comment on the risk management. I'm a little bit more familiar with risk management simply because I at one time had a client who was a specialist risk management and risk manager, and had a statewide reputation, probably one of the top 3 or 4 in California. And that was an eye-opener for me, because I didn't understand that because he sold insurance, a lot of prior to really focusing just on consulting, a lot of people felt like he was an insurance guy, and what he'd do is come in and help you take a look at your insurance. But the truth of the matter is that he happened to be selling insurance. That was his job at that time, or prior to this time. But his actual background was in the broad risk management category, which, as you said, involves a wide array of things. In fact, you mentioned a couple of financial things that he didn't necessarily bring up, or that I can't remember. It's been some years ago now. But he would talk about all the other things that you could do other than buying insurance to mitigate risk in case something would go wrong. And that was a substantial and broad number of activities that really shows that risk management, and of course you don't have a risk manager specialty until you've got a pretty good sized company. And so the CFO clearly would be the guy, I think, who would be managing that and probably be the one who hires the risk manager. And so it's just a lot broader and a lot deeper, I think, than a typical person might think. And as you said, it is not just insurance. It's really broad. It might be as simple as not as simple, but it includes policies and you're getting back up on your feet after you have a flood. You've got X amount of dollars invested that are coming back to you from your insurance, but that doesn't cover nearly the whole gamut. And you may choose to have been insured for one malady as opposed to another catastrophe. And so, what do you do to be ready for that? What is your policy procedure for getting back up and running? How much new equipment do you have to buy? How do you develop the financial background to be able to do that? Do you have banking relationships to be able to quickly get back in? These are all real interesting things that you don't tend to think about, but this really helps delineate, I think, each of these areas very well. It's a nicely done chart.
Yeah, I wanted to add too, I think that to kind of complement what Ron just said, while I haven't seen you use this particular chart. I've certainly observed you doing it, at clients where I saw that you really had a much broader understanding than what I had particularly or previously seen in somebody who was a CPA. And this chart here helps anybody who's looking for somebody to hire to be able to look at it in a way that that isn't typical. And I think in my mind, when we worked together, when I first met you, clearly you were very concerned with strategy. And as we met with people, it was always a matter of helping them understand performance, and not in a thuggish sort of way, if I can use that word, but rather, how are we all we're playing to the same sheet of music, and making sure when we get to where we're supposed to be playing, we're actually playing the right notes. So from my perspective, this is very helpful. And I know in terms of our client, it was extremely valuable for them to make the transition they did, which enabled one of the partners to get out of the business. So good job, Ed.
Well, I think, I want to kind of address some of the points you both have made here. And number one is you can get by with an inexperienced person. And there's been a big inflation on promoting people to the term of CFO from a controllership position. It does a lot of disservice because you don't have somebody with the experience, and experience matters in this situation, to hold everybody in account in the company or related to the company accountable. We talked about, Ron talked about risk management, and he brought up a very good point. Without a good CFO putting pressure on these relationships and holding people accountable for results and double checking the coverage that the company is paying for, you are relying exclusively on an outsider who may come into your company once or twice a year, who's got a big performance impact on the results of your company. So again, if you have a seasoned veteran with 10 years plus experience in this area, it really can add value throughout all these different areas of the company. So, and same thing goes with performance and with strategy. It all comes together. Unfortunately, most people are looking at somebody do their financial statements, and that's not really the true value of a CFO. And a lot of times they use the terms controller, CFO, and CPA firms all in the same breath, and the responsibilities are extremely different. And again, knowing how to run a business and what to look for makes a big difference in generating results. So I'm going to move on to the next step, and I'm going to talk a little bit about a profile of a four-star CFO. And again, it's strategic about growing business and increasing margins. Collaborative, really important. You're not competing. A lot of controllers I run into, they're competing with the production director, the marketing person. When it comes to the CFO, you're at a level similar to the CEO. And having a good CEO and CFO are extremely important because we tend to look at things completely different. And that's where you really get some synergy between those two positions if they're on the same page and not competing with one another. So again, I keep hitting the word collaboration. I really believe in that, and it's really important for the results of the company. And showing your sphere of influence. And sphere of influence is developed because of experience. You know how to handle situations. You know how to handle people. You see that you're all on the same. You should be on the same team, rowing the boat in the same direction. And as we talked, experience.
Let me break in there and support your point a little bit. As I've stated several times in these talks, I've basically employed myself most of my life. But there was a period of about 7 years that 4 of which I was on the management staff of a company, and worked with us with the CFO, and that was an excruciatingly unpleasant event. And the reason is because the CFO was a young hotshot CPA from one of the, in those days, Big Five firms. And so he came walking in at the age of, maybe 34, 33, 30, somewhere like that. I was probably close to 40 at the time and had a lot more experience running things than he did. And of course, he worked with our president and vice president, et cetera. This guy tended to use the financial statements in a punitive way. He would utilize the budgeting process to beat people down and to win or lose his influence with different departments. And I was a departmental head, and I had one of the largest budgets in the company, and it was in the area of developing product. And I was quite surprised at the way that he would utilize the budget and the purse strings to influence the development of the whole product. And as a result, we did get the product done, and it was immensely successful in the marketplace. But his notion of risk management and the way that he evaluated it was so bad that it destroyed the product, and that division basically never did blossom into what it should have been. And it catapulted into another division and basically shut down that one, because my product was a solution to the drawbacks of the other division. And so he killed two at once. It was pretty interesting to see how poorly he behaved. And because so many people of that type have a personality which tends to be maybe not very self-assured, it was a really interesting experience. And that particular guy single-handedly caused the company to retract by about 35%. And it was because he put people off. Nobody liked him. Everybody hated him. They called him names behind his back. It was a really, really caustic situation.
Well, that's a great example of a level one CFO that hasn't developed the skills of the next three levels.
That's right. That's right.
And you're losing out on the teamwork of the company, because we all know as consultants, what we try to do is get everybody on the same page working together so that they can optimize the company. Because what ends up happening, if you have someone who's operating in that manner, he's trying to make a name for himself, and he wants to become probably the CEO. And I think that's one of the biggest dangers you have in any company, is having people trying to do jobs they're not hired for.
Yeah.
And look better than everybody else at the detriment of everybody else that they're comparing against. So it's a win-win. And if you don't have a win-win situation, that company cannot be optimized.
Yeah, right. And he would do other things too, like utilize his budgeting influence to be able, and he did some good things. I'm not saying that he didn't have some plus qualities, but he for instance allowed us to buy personal computers in order to get new projects started. This is a long time ago, when the company was basically a mainframe company, and it was a direct contradiction to what the data processing side of the company, who controlled the products that we were delivering. And so he did do some of that. He had a partial vision that was correct, but his ability to work in teams was so poor that he managed to destroy the company anyway. Yeah.
Well, that kind of gets into the next point, being transparent and trustful. You can't be talking different terminology and different concepts with people without being open to everybody. Transparency is really powerful when getting everybody on the same page, and it does help come up with trust between people, and that helps the teamwork. A good CFO will also be heavily involved in continuous improvement for the company and for everybody working in that company, including himself or herself. Extremely important, because to be able to compete in the marketplace, you have to have skills, continue developing your skills that can help you get to where you want to go.
If I could make an observation there, Ed, I think having had the opportunity to work with you on multiple clients is that ability to work as a team and think outside of your CFO box is very unusual. As Ron was saying, it's one thing to have financial skills, it's a whole other to understand your role in operations and permit people to make suggestions that you'll think about, as opposed to, as Ron was suggesting with the person he was talking about, make judgments about them. So, those are all key things that we would hope somebody who's watching this can take away as they start looking for their own CFO.
And as we have talked many times, Ray and Ron, the ability to create a high-performing culture, it's what it's all about. The culture will drive results, so it's extremely important, especially when it's aligned with the strategies of the company. And the CFO has to be leveraging every single asset, intangible or tangible, in the company, including the workforce, capital, and technology, for getting better at what the company does, driving down costs, increasing margins, and looking for new ways of developing new sources of revenue that are profitable. And probably the last item on the list here is one thing that very few people can do, but it's extremely important. If you can't make a decision, you are going to cause a lot of stress and take away from performance in the company, because everybody's waiting for you to make a decision. And if you can't make it, we're just basically at impasse, can't move forward. And looking at the data, understanding the performance, the culture of the company, the cost structure, you got to be able to make the tough decisions. And I think that's one of the things that puts a lot of companies at risk, is that they can't make the tough decisions. A CEO is there to grow top line revenue, but sometimes they get off kilter. They're losing sight of the bottom line. They might be growing the company like they want to, but the bottom line could be getting worse. So you got to be able to go in and make the tough decisions. And making the tough decisions really impacts not only your vendors, your customers, and all the people that work for you. So, for instance, you look at the revenue side. Ron and I have had this conversation over and over again. Certain customers are costing you more money than they're worth. You have to identify those situations, and you got to have a planned action to deal with them. You either got to get them in a profitable mode, or you're going to have to fire a customer. That's not an easy decision to make, but sometimes it's extremely important for the success of the company. If you're overstaffed by 10%, and no matter how much more revenue you bring in, you're not bringing any more, bottom line is you got to make that tough decision. And that might be the toughest decision of all, because that's looking at people that you work with side by side and managing the company and growing the company. So that's extremely, extremely difficult to make. And then vendors are always trying to impress you and trying to get a firmer hand in the company. And sometimes you got to say, you're just not doing the job. If you're the insurance provider for workers' comp and you're not adding value, you're not settling cases in a timely manner, you got to move on and find somebody else who can. And you can't do that unless you have the experience behind you to know who's performing and who's not performing. The last slide I have to talk about is why you can't afford to operate without a four-star CFO. And in this presentation, we talked about the four key functions: strategic, performance, risk management, and financial management. Ron brought up a perfect example of a CFO who's probably very smart, understands GAAP, has probably some decent business instincts, but doesn't have the level of experience necessary at working with people, getting everybody on the same page when they don't report to you, and following a strategic plan that is best suited for the company for growing value. That's really important. So having these different aspects of a company taken care of by someone who knows what they're doing really means a lot, because otherwise the CEO will be taking on some of these responsibilities, maybe some of the ownership will. Well, they don't have 5 years of experience going to school, and they don't have 10 years of experience doing a CFO job. And you just can't find someone to do all this stuff without the proper training and experience. You have to add value. They add value beyond a controller. A controller being promoted to a CFO without the experience and the education really doesn't add any value to the bottom line of the firm, of the company. And a CPA firm that doesn't have operating experience really can't help the company either. And Ron and I were in a meeting just last week where someone was saying, well, there's this CPA firm, they know how to do strategic planning, and they're going to add that value to the company. And I find it very, very concerned about that statement, because CPA firms don't do that. CPA firms, they do taxes and they certify financial statements for the most part. They don't do consulting and they don't do strategic planning. So you got to have the right people doing the right parts of the job. And likewise, a CFO isn't going to be able to certify your financial statements. So that isn't something that they do well either. Collaboration, we talked about that. Building a team between all the leadership positions is extremely important. Being highly educated to look around the corner, which is extremely important. Trying to figure out what risk is out there that you haven't thought about, and so that when it happens, at least you have a plan in place that gets you out of that situation. Again, it's exerting your sphere of influence is extremely important as a CFO. You're accomplished at dealing with bankers, attorneys, auditors, brokers, deal makers. I recently had an opportunity of taking a big bank into a level of, what are you doing for us? And big banks aren't normally used to dealing with customers that hold them accountable for those types of things. And we got a lot of things improved, a lot of extras, and our borrowing amount went down, our borrowing rate went down significantly because of that experience. And again, you're just asking for performance from each one of you, the people that support the company. Again, I can't see why you don't have a CFO. They're going to generate 4 or 5 or up to 10 times what you pay them in results, and they're going to limit the risk of the company. And recently, there's so many good CFOs out there that can be utilized on a part-time basis. You just have to be looking for the right skill set. And with that said, that pretty much concludes my presentation on a 4-star CFO.
Would be helpful, Ed. The points you've made here are excellent. As a listener, how would you recommend they find somebody like this? Because as I look at this and I think about the CPAs or the CFOs that we've known and Ron's run into, it's one thing to be able to lay this thing out. The other thing is, how do you recommend someone move forward to find this kind of needle in a haystack?
Well, I think you can Google CFOs, and I think you'll get a different list of potential qualifications than Googling a CPA firm. So I think, or a controller, you got to know exactly what you're looking for. I think what's really important is taking this presentation and divining a job description of what you're looking for, and then going out and trying to find those people and evaluate their past experience for what they can do to help you add value to the company.
A question for you. Obviously there are many ways to get them, and we're portraying one, which I think is effective. It's like go out and look for consultants. People who are watching this could certainly see that there would be an advantage in getting you on board in a part-time basis. But in addition to that, how do you feel about finding CFOs from other companies, including competitors?
Well, I think one of the things that you can do as a CFO that can help a company, and maybe I'll be answering this in a roundabout way, your question, but is helping onboard a younger CFO type and help training them to take on the responsibilities full time for the company. Again, most CFOs that are starting up, they don't get that type of onboarding opportunity. And last week we talked about onboarding.
Right.
It's really important that someone help them understand their responsibilities, because I guarantee when they come on board, most of these potential or new CFOs, they're looking at generating financial statements. Well, that's only about 15% of the job. They're missing out on the big part, and they need experience. They need help in understanding how to do some of these things. So I think in addition to being a part-time CFO, I think you can use a part-time CFO to help onboard a full-time CFO
Right.
for the future. And to me, it's not competition. It's all about collaboration on trying to find the right person to fill a slot that can really make some significant improvement to the valuation of a company by utilizing a four-star CFO.
And I think I see Ron has a point here, but one of the observations I wanted to make that I think is important, this kind of a person, if I were to look at it from the outside, I think this is a $100,000 a year person. Whereas I think what we're saying, and what I'm hearing from you, Ed, is that using a part-time CFO can give you the same caliber of person without that huge investment, particularly for a smaller company. Is that accurate?
It's accurate, but I think the number for a good controller is $100,000. Just to give you a ballpark on what to budget. A good CFO is going to be double that. And that's on a full-time basis. On a part-time basis, you take full advantage of hiring somebody who is a true four-star CFO who's got significant experience in each one of these areas that they can demonstrate to you on how they can add value if you had interest in asking these questions.
Right.
And unfortunately, we're dealing with old playbooks and people thinking that a CFO only does this,
right.
Rather than having an expanded role in the company. For my first 10 years as a CFO, I was training to become a CEO. And I learned after 10 years the hard way that, hey, my role for my future, what I'm really good at is not a CEO. I am really good at being a CFO, and that's where I want to specialize. So again, trying to be someone you're not is one of the greatest disservices to a company that you can provide.
Right.
Yeah,
And
it's a little bit like the old, the age-old Peter principle, where everybody thinks that the goal in business is to ascend as high as you can. And that's really kind of stinking thinking, as they say. The reason is that not everybody is suited to be the president or a CEO. And for the same reasons, it's true of a CEO, a CFO, and many other jobs in a business. It's the team and the skills that individuals have. Yeah, you can move up the ladder within the area where you have both the skills and the temperament to be able to do that. And some CEOs, have been CFOs before. But in my experience, they're kind of different companies than where you've got a CEO that sort of came up in the business and understands the skill levels and the product side, or maybe the marketing side of the business very, very well. And it's kind of an interesting thing. It's harder to find a CEO maybe who comes up from that side, who can also understand what they should get in a CFO. But it's very straightforward, and I believe it's very straightforward to be able to hire a CFO, and you've laid this out so well. It shows the amount of education and experience that's necessary and how broad it really is. And it goes way beyond the idea of, well, that's just a CPA who's decided to go to the business side. Very few. I've worked with many CPAs over the years, both as an advisor to larger firms and having hired them. There are so few CPAs that make good business owners and executives. It's almost opposites. The kinds of personality that makes you a really good CPA is exactly the opposite of what makes a really good entrepreneur good at what they do. And therefore, it doesn't make a lot of sense sometimes to try and squeeze these people into a specific job when they're not naturally suited for it. But I think that in one of the big issues that I see with small businesses and trying to move towards this better control and really good seasoned person in a CFO position is that they simply can't afford it. To the average small business, it doesn't, owner is not making $200,000. You've got to have a pretty nice business in order to be able to do that. And so how many of them are going to spend that much money for a CFO that they don't quite understand what they're going to do? And that's their fault. It's not the CFO's fault. And good presidents know when they should bring these people on and when they can afford it and so forth. But they don't have this CFO who's there to help make those decisions. But what they do have is they have a controller. And they don't even know the difference between a controller and a CFO. They tend to think it's the same thing. And so it's natural just to simply go to the controller or even the bookkeeper and have the expectation that they're going to do all of these other things that are required in a company to be able to truly optimally manage all of these things. And therefore, I think that a desire to have a good CFO was something that most successful growing small business owners would love to fulfill. But they're really going to be stopped by the salary, and therefore it's too bad that we don't have CFOs for hire like we have CPAs for hire. There are lots of CPA firms that don't really provide the services that a CFO does, but there ought to be places where you could go get a CFO for hire, just like you could get a CPA. Because they are different, as you so clearly point out. And so the way that has to be solved by a smaller firm is to find an older, experienced person who maybe would like to do a part-time job and you pay them by the hour, or to find someone who is on the consulting side like you are, Ed, where you can devote a certain number of hours per week to each client, and therefore you can still you can do well, and they can get the benefit of your experience, which is more important than the benefit of you sitting working in their office. This is really a oversight experience job where other people can do the detail digging and do the reporting back. So, you know, I mean, it's very much a kind of hands-off kind of job where you do direction and you work with people and you get them to bring the information and you help make decisions and that kind of thing. And so it's a terrific opportunity for a part-time person to be able to do that. So how big does a company need to be to really be able to say, yeah, we're going to hire a $200,000 person? And I'm thinking in a service company, it's got to be, you know, it's going to be $5 million in volume. And manufacturing or product company, it's probably going to be $8 to $10 million in terms of volume. And there are not that many companies that are, you know, in that volume range. What do you think about that, Ed?
Well, you raised some excellent points, and I would say this: any company can afford the services of a part-time CFO. And what I would recommend to any company who's got any intentions of doing so is establish a report card right up front. What do you expect from this person? And try to quantify some of the savings that this person, or some of the revenue enhancement, this bottom line enhancements that this person is providing to your company. And I think you'll be well pleased that I really believe it's at least 5 times what you're paying them, you're going to see come back on the bottom line. And then you're going to get ancillary benefits of reducing risk that most operators or controllers just can't really maneuver in because they don't have the experience to be effective.
Right.
And you rely upon all these outside people for doing their jobs, and no one's holding them accountable.
Yeah.
So I think I like the report card, and you can look at it on a quarterly basis, on an annual basis, and you can see what someone can really add to the bottom line of your company. We've had situations where we worked together, and when the PPP came out, man, we jumped all over it. Some companies weren't thinking about it. And that was a one-time opportunity to really add something to your bottom line and your equity portion of the company, that if you don't have the experience of people in the leadership positions involved in these decisions, you're going to miss out on.
Yeah, that was clearly the case that you know, we've had with at least one client that we both work with, where they would not have even decided to do that had it not been for us sort of jumping up and down and saying, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this, and that's made a $500,000 difference to their business. So, you know, and there's just a single case, and you've brought several other points forward on how to make a difference in a company. And so I would say that your 1 to 5 comparison certainly has held true in my experience in seeing the kinds of things that you do. It also brings up another interesting, just I guess, observation that I'm having right now, and that is that so many CFOs only work for 2 or 3 companies as a CFO. They spend 10, 20, 30 years, and then, you know, they're in and they're out. The kind of impact that a CFO for hire can make is twofold. One is you obviously can do the work for the company, but the other one is, as a CFO sees more and more and more business operations. They gain more and more experience, and therefore their advice is even that much better. And so very, very much in my career, I've seen this to be true, where we've really worked on revenue enhancement. And I've found that I have been inside so many different companies for so many years that I have a perspective that's just not even out there. It's not because I'm smarter or better at it than other people, but it's because I have literally had way more experience than 99% of all people who call themselves, say, marketing or revenue consultants. And one of the things that I've had thrown my way over the years, as I've had discussions with a new prospect, and is the comment from the owner, you don't know anything about my business. I've been here for 25, 30 years, and how in the world can you come in here and tell me that I need to do this or I need to do that? And the answer is, I don't know your business better than you know your business, but I have had such a broad experience in so many different businesses. I've been inside other businesses for 30 years too. And that is an experience that you as the owner of this particular business have no concept of the breadth of experience that can bring to your decision making. That stops them in their tracks every single time, because they know it's true that they don't have the opportunity to look at other businesses. They're stuck in their own world. And they don't see anything on the outside except a little bit of peripheral stuff, the things that affect their business right away. Maybe they talk to a competitor, but not very often, and they lie to each other about what their performance is. They don't have any idea what's going on in the rest of the world. It's really amazing. That's the power of having people who have very, very broad experience with multiple businesses can bring to bear on an individual business.
That's an excellent point, Ron. And I think that's a problem with almost all the jobs that are advertised for CFO positions. They have so many requirements. They want 5 years of experience in this particular industry. Mm-hmm. And I think they lose out on a lot of high potential CFOs that have experience that's broader in nature and could bring a lot more to the party and add more value to the bottom line of a company.
Well, yeah, that's exactly right. And when you go through each one of these things, strategic planning, performance increases, risk management, financial management, exactly which one of those is the one that's industry specific? None of them. Those are all business processes that are going to be relatively the same for broad industries. I mean, the difference between a service and manufacturing, yeah, okay, having experience in one of those might help, but the difference between two manufacturers is so minuscule when you're talking about these kinds of things, as to be real experience. So the business owner that might be listening to us today, I want to emphasize to them that, they do seek and try to get outside perspectives. But I want to emphasize to them that when you're looking for a CFO, all of these functions are standard high performance business functions. They have very little to do with the fact that you are making blue widgets. You do not need a CFO who has experience in blue widgets.
Yeah, well said. And in particular, I've had some experience, CFO experience in government. And so I've gone in as the consultant and helped them with various projects. But it's so funny because when they hire a CFO, the number one qualification is you need to have 10 years or 5 years of experience in government.
Oh.
And a lot of these, like,
And actually, it's the reverse. To be
Yeah.
good at government, you need zero experience in government. That's
so
the,
if you're running, it's because the fund accounting can be complicated. But
yeah.
again, they're missing out. They're looking at 15% of the job controlling the hire, whereas the other 85% that can have a profound impact on the company isn't going to even make the list, because you got something in there. You got such a high level of one particular requirement that you're excluding 90% of the applicants.
Mhm.
Well, I think, doesn't that go back to the point that we're really trying to make, that as a rule, they're probably, if they're smaller, to kind of follow up on what Ron was saying, it's wiser to be able to hire somebody on a part-time basis with the level of experience that as an example, you possess, Ed, because they're not going to be able to find out on the inside. And then on the outside, you can mentor somebody to become more effective. It could be somebody inside who might be a clerk who possesses a tremendous amount of skills or wants to grow. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, I think so, but I think you got to realize that it's most likely not a clerk. It's someone who's been educated as an accountant and spent 5 years in college,
Right.
learning how to become an accountant, how to present financial statements in accordance to GAAP, which is extremely important, and
Right.
taking that basic quality and trying to educate and train them on the other aspects of the job is really, really important. And maybe that's the real role of a part-time CFO, is helping develop their CFOs to be more effective.
Yeah.
To be a coach.
Yeah.
Right.
And I would say also, Ray, a business degree, for instance, which is what you work on as you're working towards a CPA or a finance degree that may also be a master's degree. They have courses of study that include marketing and production management and insurance and real estate, and it goes on and on. And so, you're taking a course of a business course of classes that includes a broad, if not all, of the aspects of business.
Right.
It doesn't make you an expert in each one of those. It just gives you a broad background. A clerk is someone who, and of course, there are lots of valuable people who come up in the business that are very good, and some of them have a natural affinity to be able to fill other jobs. You want to keep your eye out for those people. But a clerk, say a bookkeeper, has not had any experience in or even any formal overview in any other business, in any other part of the business. So the question would be, how does one gain affinity, a broad experience in, say, a part of the business that they're not included in? And I think the answer is you have to get it either formally, or you have to have been somebody who's been in those other departments. If you've come up through the business and been in 3 or 4 different departments, and then you have the ability to learn the more advanced issues on financial accounting, risk management, et cetera, that might be a pathway. We've talked about bringing up second and third generations that way, by making them be in different departments so that they have a broad perspective about their business, because they're going to end up being running their business, but they have to be generalists in terms of knowing everything about the business.
Right.
It's kind of the way I see CFOs working. They really have to have a good sense of all the things from an operational perspective, from a theoretical perspective, and financial ability. You really have to see business in a holistic fashion, I think, in order to sit on top of the pyramid like a CFO does. More so than a CMO, a chief marketing officer, more so maybe even than the president, because the president gets to have these specialist people, 3 or 4 of them underneath them. And the president needs to have good judgment, but he doesn't need to know be an expert in accounting, but the finance guy needs to.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, because I think, the role that you're talking about, as Ed said, he was grooming himself to be a CEO, and that position that you're talking about is akin to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. The other thing that's really important is experience, and experience can cut through a lot of issues. In particular, trying to get a business owner to change because they've done things a certain way for 15, 20 years. You come in their office and you don't have any experience and you recommend that they do this, they're going to throw you out within 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Because you have really no experience to relate to. And
Yeah.
a lot of times that's the only way you can get a hook into an owner to think about things differently is with experience.
That's exactly right. You need authority. You need to come in, and the authority comes from experience. And I can't tell you how many times I would go in and make a statement, and the owner would roll her eyes and go, "Oh, why in the world did you say something like that?" And I could say, well, because out of 10 clients, 9 of them are successful doing that, and you're not. That's why. So what are you going to do? Argue with that? You could argue with that, and the business owner always gets to make the decision, but that brings authority to the recommendations that are made by somebody with powerful, deep experience. They bring authority, and when you're making decisions, you have to deal with people who have the authority to tell you where you need to make those changes.
Right.
Absolutely. Well said. This has been a great session, and you guys brought up some very good points that added a lot of meat to this conversation. Thank you very much.
You bet.
Well, thank you, guys.
Yeah.
This is a good way to wrap up Thanksgiving, and a good thing to be thankful for is finding a good CFO who can help you grow your business.
Right.
Absolutely.
So I guess we'll with that, man, we're off, and we want to have a good weekend, and we'll come back next week with another episode of the 3 Consulting Amigos, and we're